Action. Welcome, Cynthia, to the Rumikay Talks.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course, it's been a while since last time I saw you. Yeah, the pandemic.
Yeah, the pandemic. That feels like it's been forever since we've seen anybody.
Pandemic is an equalizer, and also it makes us rethink what we need to do with our lives, which direction to pursue, which path to pursue.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, why did you even start to pursue the career in the entertainment industry? What was the desire to take that first job as a writer, director, producer? Which one was the first, by the way? And which one you prefer to do the most?
That's a really interesting question. For me, I don't know if it was a very conscious choice because when I was very young, I had found a Super 8 camera. I don't know if you know what that is. It's like one of those old-fashioned, cameras. And so I was playing with it as a kid, and I would make little stop-motion animated films. And I also was drawing a lot, so I would draw comic strips and write stories. And then when I had a reunion not too long ago of my grammar school class, so meaning 11, 12, 13 years old class, they all remembered me for one thing, which was the 8th grade play that I wrote, cast, directed, I guess produced. I had no idea what those things were. I just know I wrote this play, wanted everyone to be in it, got permission from the school to put it on in the auditorium. Next thing I know, they were calling me a director. And I was like 12 or 13 years old. So I don't know if I ever made a conscious choice. I think it just came about naturally. Then later in college, I took an acting class, mostly to overcome shyness, believe it or not. I was incredibly shy, and I wanted to learn how to overcome that. And when I took that acting class, my acting coach wanted to really encourage me to think more about directing. And then as I continued with college, I was asked if I wanted to go on a trip, which was actually an MTV shoot, which I was not going to work the shoot. I was just going because I had a free room and all I had to do was pay my own way to get to Florida or something like that. And then I would get this free week with a friend. And long story short, I ended up working that whole MTV shoot. And then they reimbursed me for my flight, saying, well, we couldn't have done it without you. So then, grad school came around and I needed a job, and HBO was hiring temps. And so I was a temp at HBO, and the next thing I knew, I was in their development department. I was offered a permanent job there. So it kind of just sort of snowballed, and it continued because I just continued doing what I like doing. And little by little, it worked into producing. I think producing was probably the first title. I think that's what you're asking me. Mostly because I think there's a generational part of this. This was the 90s, and women were not really recognized for writing and directing, but producing seemed to be much more of a natural fit. So I was put into producing roles. But when I think back, I was absolutely writing. I was absolutely directing. And I realized it one day when it was a PA or someone who was managing the slate, like when you have the clapboard. And on the clapboard was producer's name, director's name, and I saw it in the prompter or the monitor. I saw they put Hsiung, my last name, next to director. And I thought, oh, I guess I'm directing this. Okay. And the next thing you knew, I was directing segments. So I was producing, directing, writing segments. So it was very organic, and it's hard for me to pick which one really came first because I feel like I've been doing all three for forever.
So would you say those are like just the titles, and you sort of were doing what life was throwing at you, and then people were calling you titles, like you're a writer or you're a producer?
I think that's exactly, I think that exactly is right. When I was at HBO, I was in development. So that was a whole nother area where I was working with other writers, directors, producers, and working I mean, I was in a junior capacity, so I was part of that development team, learning, really, absorbing as much as I could. And then when I really wanted to get my hands into it all a little bit more, that's when I pursued a position at MTV. And MTV back then was a much bigger deal than it is now. It was a great training ground for anyone who was creative and just wanted to get their hands dirty and figure out how to get things made. And that's what I did. So I kind of feel like I graduated from MTV University or something in television. And then I moved to Los Angeles because I really wanted to get into narrative, which I didn't even know was named narrative at the time. It was basically scripted. So scripted television, scripted film. And so when I moved to Los Angeles, I became at first I was doing freelance producing, and then I was director of development for a production company called Spygaze Pictures, which was a movie of the week company, which they no longer really do. But back then that was a big thing, which was the movie of the week, which meant a movie on television every week. And after a little bit of that, then MTV asked me to come back to do a whole summer show that I would be producing and writing for. And so I was doing that. And then I ended up evolving, I think, into documentaries for a little bit for VH1 and then into narrative scripted television, which is what I wanted. So then I ended up doing Young Hercules for Renaissance Pictures, which was the company that also did Hercules and Xena. And Young Hercules starred Ryan Gosling, which I know everyone always wants to bring up.
Yeah, that's a big one. We're going to talk about it. Don't worry. So, like these days, many young creators who just, let's say, graduated from the film school or like other creative school, everyone seems to be telling them, like the teachers and someone who is early in their career, like you have to focus, you have to pick one thing. Like you're a writer, you stick to the writing. You're a director, you stick to directing. Producer, and so on. And many get confused because they want to they like to tell stories, but they don't mind directing or producing at the same time. What would you say about this? What is your opinion on this?
To me, they all intersect. All of those three intersect: writing, directing, producing. It really is. If you take, for example, your smartphone and you take some video and you decide to put together some little couple of minutes worth of something you are interested in, then you decide, that you want to get a little more elaborate, whatever, you're basically writing, producing, and directing right there. And of course, if you're doing it on your smartphone, you're probably needing to edit it as well. So if you have all those skill sets, then you really are essentially a filmmaker. And film and television are pretty similar in terms of the mechanisms that get the job done or the execution mechanisms. The medium is different. Of course, it's about how much time do you really have. If you decide that you really want to be a writer, that takes a lot of time. Every single one of those takes a lot of time. So I think if you really think your love is more towards writing, then I would say that's the backbone for all of the pieces of it. If you don't have a firm foundation in storytelling, then it makes it that much harder to really bring together the pieces that you would like to see come to life.
Yeah. So, but for yourself, you would say you're more a producer because of the times that you started, but in heart, a writer?
Everyone who goes into this profession at heart likely is a storyteller. That's the way I like to look at myself. I think of myself as a storyteller. So whatever part of me I need to access to get that story executed, that's what I generally will be doing. I absolutely have moments where I focus completely on writing, and then most people don't hear from me for a while. And then I have other times when I just decide I need to get out there with the camera or whatever, and then I access a bit more of the director in me. And then other times when I think the producer's natural. I think that producing is one of those things that you are tapping into so many parts of yourself to just be resourceful and to get the job done, that's really producing.
Imagine the time when you were just starting out, that young, energetic Cynthia who was ready to take on the world. What was your family opinion on your activities when you were just starting out and not sure whether that's something that you want to pursue?
My mother's opinion was, that's a hobby, so let's get back to math, or let's get back to studying, or let's get back into science or something. Yeah, she certainly didn't look at the creative areas as a profession, but she also didn't come from that herself. So there definitely wasn't the encouragement. It was more of a sense that you can have that as a hobby, but you need to do well in your studies.
Well, that's how the producer mindset was born, I guess. You have to manage all the things at once.
Absolutely. And I'm a mother, so I can absolutely see why she would look at it that way. And I think I know I'm not alone. I know there are plenty of colleagues who have said similar things to me about what their parents thought. And it was a different era also. I mean, being a woman in going to college in the 80s to 90s, it was definitely a different era. I mean, women were not thought of in the profession of film and television so much. And it was not something that you could point to and go, oh, well, you could be like, Steven Spielberg, or, because there weren't any women that were like that.
Would you say it became much easier right now for a woman to get inside the industry as a writer, director?
I think since the Me Too movement, absolutely. I see women in the credit role as director, as writer so often now, whereas when I was in my early days, never. I mean, it would be so rare that you would see a woman's name in the credits. So you would see a woman's name maybe in the producer chair, in the producer credit, but very, very rarely would you see a woman's name as a writer or a director.
If right now, for example, you would give advice for a young aspiring writer-director, a female writer-director, what advice would you give them? What to focus on, and kind of how to navigate your mind through this strange and sometimes dangerous environment?
I would say, do not doubt yourself. Pretty simple. Do it. Do what comes from your heart, and don't doubt yourself.
That's pretty simple to follow. I hope everyone's listening. Just do that. All right, Ryan Gosling. Tell us about Ryan Gosling. How did you encounter Ryan Gosling? How did you discover Ryan Gosling? How did it happen?
How did it happen? Ryan was such a happy, almost accident. So Young Hercules was greenlit off of a pilot. A pilot was made. It was a feature-length pilot, and it had another actor. The other actor declined to do the series, and so it was time to immediately recast the role. And we had very little time because the series was greenlit to television, and so we had very firm dates as to when we were going to begin shooting and when we were going to have to deliver episodes, because they were airing it in September of that year. So we needed to have the series shot. We were feverishly holding casting sessions, seeing so many different actors. Certain actors might have looked brawny like Hercules, and the role was for a young version of the Kevin Sorbo adult Hercules series. So I think the initial idea was to cast someone who was very brawny, someone very muscly. The problem was it was a young Hercules, and this is back in the 90s. You didn't have as many pumped up looking young actors. So it was a little hard to find a young actor who looked muscly and built and whatnot. And all of the different actors who came in just kind of maybe looked the part, but maybe didn't really have that aspect that you're looking for when you're looking to cast a lead. And then almost literally I would have to say really at the 11th hour, Ryan Gosling walks in at the 11th hour, and we sit down for another casting session. And there are a couple more actors than just him. And he comes in, and when he read the sides, and the sides are like a sheet of a scene from the series that all of the actors come in and they read the same scene. So then you can kind of compare. So Ryan comes in and he reads the exact same sides that I've heard a million times by this point. Something about the way he read it, though, and I remember his hands, he moved his hands up and down, and it was as though the room moved with his hands. I remember feeling like my body was almost swaying as he moved his hands while he was in his audition. And I just knew it. He left the room and I was like, that's our guy. But
Wow.
that wasn't the easiest sell, because Ryan back then, if you can imagine, was about 6'1" and 120 pounds or something like that. He was really, really thin. Yeah, really, really thin. And I didn't even, when I look back, I was like, that's not even possible he could be that thin. But then my own son is like that right now. So I'm like, okay, I think that my memory's right. He was really, really thin, 120, 125 pounds, really thin. So people weren't really buying that he was Hercules, like this big. So I had to talk through layer after layer of executive to convince them that this was our guy. And I kept saying the same thing, which was, sure, maybe he's a little thin at the moment, but he certainly looks like he's going to grow into himself. And if any actor is going to convince an audience that he's going to grow into Hercules, it's Ryan Gosling. And with that one line, I convinced, level after level of executive, the way I like to look at it, because I had to go up the ranks, and every time I would use the same argument and I would get the okay, and then I go to the next level of so it was this process to kind of to get people to re-examine him as for his acting, rather than the fact that he was 17 years old and quite young and was still growing into his body. But I think it's so fun for me to now see him in things like The Gray Man, where you see this brawny guy, and every time I see him now in the movies, I think, okay, see, he did grow into that brawny body shape. It's just that he was very young at the time.
So would you say that persuasion is an important skill to develop as a producer, especially at the higher level? You need to, if you want something, you need to persuade many levels of people to get what you want.
Absolutely. Persuasion, but it's not just persuasion, because persuasion can look almost like a sales tactic. Oh, yes, you're just a good salesperson. But it's more than that. There's a line I always remembered from a colleague who is incredibly successful. And he said, always remember the show is the boss. And that's actually saying in Hollywood in general. But for me, it was always about fighting for what was best for whatever I was working on. So if it was Young Hercules, it was fighting for who would make the best Hercules and why. But the other thing I always say, even when I'm teaching, is it's about selling them on the story, selling them on the creative, selling everyone on really what is the valuable component of it, which is the integrity of the creative, the integrity of the story, the integrity of who's going to bring it to life the best. And so that's less of a sales pitch, but more of a rationale behind it. And that's always what I stand by.
Would you say most of the time it's a hard job to get something that you want, or sometimes there are moments when we found the right guy, everyone agrees with it, and let's go?
It is a struggle to get what you want. You definitely have to compromise along the way. It's a little bit of picking your battles for sure. And then it's also understanding who you're talking to, because if the person you're talking to cares more about ratings, for example, then you have to play to that audience, and you have to understand what works in that regard and what they're thinking about and what is part of their calculus, and figure into that language. There is a little bit of really understanding or a lot of it, I should say, of understanding how the business works, so that you're fighting the good fight rather than fighting the losing fight.
In general, in terms of your wins and your losses, your failures in your career as a whole. Would you mind sharing a moment in your life when something didn't go the way that you wanted and it failed? Something didn't go the way you wanted at all. Was there a moment in your life that you could share with our audience? And also, what did you learn from it?
There was a script I found when I was doing development that I fell in love with. I loved this script. Now this is in the mid to late 1990s, so the coming of the millennium was in front of us. And it was a script that was about that part of history, and that there was actually a whole moment of apocalyptic outcome and a young, unassuming hero who was supposed to be put on Earth to be able to save us from all of this. So I fell in love with this script, and I worked with the writer to make it even deeper and richer and much more poignant. And I brought in another couple of people into the team thinking it would help it, because I have to say it again, but because I'm a woman in the 90s, it wasn't something that was adding to a project really to have a woman spearhead, especially an action film. So I brought in a couple of people who were already established, who were willing to help with it and have their names attached. And I found out a couple of years later, and I don't know if they even know I found this out, but I found out that they actually took it from me and apparently optioned it. And I never really knew all the details, but it definitely was disappointing. It definitely it made me feel very defeated. But what I remember thinking though was I learned that you can definitely fuel your spirit with naivete, right? Which is what I feel I had. I had this sort of this naive spirit, and I just wanted to see this come to life. But it also taught me I had to be a professional, and what I needed to do, I did not do, which was I needed to put a deal in on paper, and I didn't do that. So that was one of those lessons which I thought to myself, well, bad on you, Cynthia. You should have put something on paper. And so I've never made that mistake again.
Yeah, well, that's a great advice. That's that happens all the time. Yeah, put everything on paper as much as you can. Your creative success and your financial success with the creative projects that you've done. Tell us both. What was the project that brought you the most love for your heart, and tell us about the project that brought the most amount of money in your wallet.
I think the money part sometimes comes when you least expect it, because you do a lot of projects and some of them have back end payments that you get later, and you don't expect to see that this sold better than you ever expected. And so then you see these checks come in that you never thought would. So that's always a nice surprise. The ones that you think I think that's a philosophy that I would rather, I think, turn what you asked into what I think is probably a healthier attitude, which to me, it's money comes if you keep doing the work that you want to do. Always understanding though that some projects you might want to do for money that you're not that crazy about, but then there are other projects that those money paying projects allow you to do the passion projects. So I think it's about keeping a balance. And I that's where I've always been lucky, because I love the work so much, and I love the colleagues that I have gone through the years developing great relationships with. So if someone calls me from years ago or whatever, I'm always more than happy to work with people I've worked with before. So I think it's better to think of your career that way, if that makes sense, because I still think there are paydays from my yesterdays that I don't even know about today, you know? And
Yeah.
that's something that if you focus too much on that, then it's a lot of stress that I don't think you need to take on.
You're talking about the residuals, right? That you keep getting from
Yeah,
the
whether it be
projects, right?
residuals or deals that you had in place from things that I don't want to say you've forgotten about, but you might have almost forgotten about. And then someone says, well, you know, that project that you worked on and this and that. I mean, I have a screenplay from 20 years ago, I want to say, that keeps getting new people wanting to option it for something new. And recently it came up again where this one, same one, there's an interest to have it optioned to make it into a graphic novel series that then could have and I don't even know all the details because it's through another producer, but there is the potential for it to have almost a pilot track for an Amazon Studio project is what I was told. So these things happen all the time. And that I literally had to reread this something I worked on 20 years ago. I had to remember and go through old hard drives to look for everything. And I thought, oh yeah, that's right. That's what that was about, and who knows? So if you do things that you really like doing with the understanding that you're not doing it in a vacuum, you are doing it into a medium that gets in front of an audience, then usually it pays off after time, and you just keep showing it to people and keep it in front of people.
You mentioned the graphic novel. You mean that you want to first publish the graphic novel and then make the show, or make it simultaneously?
Yeah, this is through another producer. So it's a track that I have not explored yet, so I don't have the details other than he's done this with other projects, he says, where he takes a property, they turn it into a graphic novel, and it's almost like a pilot. It's looked at as, let's see if that's popular, if it's successful. And if it is, it could then be looked at as turning it into a series, or I don't know if there's a track for it to be a film. It started out as a film that was also, then we reworked it into a pilot. So it's just having new life every time I look at it.
Yeah, right now these days it's. There's lots of mixed media things happening. For example, like graphic novels. Like there's this movie Dune that Denis Villeneuve, that there's a graphic novel that comes kind of like along with it. I don't know whether they connect it or not, but I'm reading the graphic novel. And people do web series on YouTube, and then it gets picked up by HBO and made into like a full TV show, like Insecure. Yeah, what would you say your thoughts about this, like the future of entertainment, especially for people who just not just starting out, but who wants to get their project out there, wants to get them to like HBO or to the studios, to get it made in a big way, but right now they cannot do it. What they can do if they don't have the budget, like huge budgets and things, but they have passion and they have talent? What would be your advice?
It's easier now than ever to make something come to life. So I had mentioned to you when I was a child, I had found a Super 8 camera, and I started to take my toys and I would do these little stop motion animated pieces. Then when I was a little older and didn't have a camera with me, I figured out how to make little pop-up scenes out of paper. And people would see all these things I made, and they recognized me for doing creative things. So the more people saw what I was doing, not because I was pushing in front of anyone, but just because this is what I was interested in doing, then I was being asked to do more things that were creative. That's an example of how you get recognized for your talent and for your creativity. And nowadays, are so many different ways to do that. There's YouTube, there's your smartphone. Literally, I've had students who have made little short films on their iPhones they've taught themselves how to edit and edited those pieces together on iMovie. They've entered them into contests. They have won in contests. I mean, I've seen this before my very eyes. And if I were 19, 20, 25, 30, if I were any age younger, even right now, I still like to do little projects like that just because something interests me. It spurs my creativity, and I decide, okay, I'm going to make a little movie about the sand on the beach, and I'm going to move how the sand moves from dawn to dusk or whatever. And so I'll experiment with the camera setting and do the time lapse or something or other. And it's if I were to upload that onto my YouTube channel or what have you, then who knows? I mean, people see this, and then it maybe spurs an idea for me to continue doing a story about it, or something to do with a scenario, a movie, let's say, that takes place in one day. And so, and it started with that little movie. So these are the things that I would say that people should just do. If you have a dream, if you have a passion, if you want to and need to really from inside to create stories and to create these, whatever it might be, then I would say just do it in whatever form you can, and get it in front of people if you can, or quietly put it somewhere, whatever it might be. And generally people will be drawn to it.
Yes, there's so many options out there available. You can do it on YouTube, you can do it TikTok, or maybe you can write a pilot and submit it somewhere. But I know there are some people who get paralyzed by the variety of it. Now, what should I do? What should I make like 10 YouTube videos, or should I write one TV pilot? It ended up doing nothing. For me, sometimes I catch myself thinking about it, but then I overcome it. But for you, do you have those thoughts like, what should I do? Should I do this or that? And how do you manage to focus yourself on one thing at a time?
That's a great question in today's world of distraction, because there's so many things to distract us. I would keep, now I'm an old-fashioned kind of gal, maybe for, let's say, my son's generation. My son's 19 years old. Maybe he would use his smartphone and take notes on his phone. I like the old-fashioned pen and paper. So I will keep some kind of a notepad with me, some kind of a notebook, and I will just jot down ideas. And when I say this, it will be any time of day. It could be 2 or 3 in the morning, and I might wake up suddenly with something in my mind, and I would jot it down. And then if I look at it the next day or a week later, if it still interests me, then I might continue to add on to it. There are a lot of distractions, and I think that if you really want a career in television or film, you do have to, at some point, push things aside and hear your own voice. If you can't hear your own creative voice, that is definitely an obstacle, and you want to work on not getting in your own way, right? So if you've gotten to know yourself a little, and you know that the creative part of you is not going away, then you have to discipline yourself. You have to push the other noise aside. If it means you have to sit in a dark room by yourself for an hour, that's what you have to do. I mean, Bill Gates, I just heard this the other day. I think he locked himself in a room for something like, 6 days or something when he wrote DOS, right? When he wrote the original DOS that became Microsoft. I could have gotten those days wrong, but he apparently locked himself in a room and he did all of this. And I think that we, as creative people, we think, oh, well, creativity means being free and doing whatever. No, you have to be disciplined. If you're not disciplined, then you will be that creative spirit that's tortured by your own creativity that can't seem to get out of you. So if you decide that you want to create a path for yourself out of that torturous place of being creative but not being able to get it out, then set a schedule for yourself. Set a disciplined scenario for yourself. Give yourself maybe a weekend where you don't talk to anyone, you don't get on social media. If you need to spend time even in your own car, wherever it might be that you can feel and hear your own thoughts, then that's what you have to do. And you have to have some kind of something, whether it be, like I said, a pen and a piece of paper to write on, if it's a laptop, whatever is your choice of tool to get it out from inside you onto another medium, you just need to do it.
Yeah. What was the longest time that you isolated yourself to write something?
Well, I am like a 4 a.m. writer. So when I'm writing, it's almost as though it's an internal clock for me. But I also have, I now have grown children, but I've had, for a long time, I had young children and I had to write a lot when my kids were young. I would get up around 4 in the morning and I'd be in, from 4 to 6, I'd be in writer mode and I would just get a massive amount of writing out during that time. I don't recommend that for everyone, but I have heard a lot of people say that they do enjoy the hours that most people are, when most people are sleeping. They do seem to get a lot of writing done when the rest of the world is sleeping. And I've often said to people, if that's what it takes, then set your alarm clock for, 2, 3, 4 in the morning and just get up and start writing. You can sleep later, I guess. I mean, I don't know, depending, of course, on what life brings your way. But I mean, I look at it when I'm on a show, for example, I might be up literally at 3, 4 in the morning and it doesn't stop. So it won't ever really stop. I think that's the thing about creativity. It's got a life of its own and you have to just provide a place for it to land. But you do have to nurture it and take care of it.
Yeah. I would agree with this, that when everyone's sleeping, there's some kind of, almost like a connection to the universe opens up for you. The universe energy is not connected to everyone while like people are sleeping. There is more coming to you, so you're more creative in a sense. Yeah, and I've done both, that writing at night when everyone's sleeping, writing early in the morning when everyone's sleeping, and both work well in terms of what you get on paper. But in terms of the body functions, I think the mornings are better than writing at night, because then you wake up or you just don't sleep at all. You come with your work and you just don't know what's happening. You start starting to see things because you didn't get enough sleep.
I agree with you. I think, yeah, you do have to manage resting your body also, but everyone's wired differently. For me, I can't sleep a lot of times. I can't sleep if I have something that's creating, or something creative that's brewing in my mind. So it's almost becomes a need for me to get it out on paper so that I can go to sleep. But that's a part of me that I think I discovered, and I think I was otherwise, like most people, kind of a tortured soul, always wondering why I would feel as deeply as I think I want to. Who knows? You can't measure everyone's feelings, but for me, at various points in my life, I felt like, why do I always have these feelings? I can't seem to get them out of me, and then it became something that manifested in not being able to sleep. And then when I'd be awake during some nights, that's when creative thoughts would come to me. And that's when I started to just think, well, let me see if I just write them down, what would happen. And it kind of organically evolved into realizing, well, that's what it is. I need to get this out of me, and then I can sleep. I'm not saying that's everyone, but that's how it ended up being for me. And I have a feeling it happens that way in maybe a somewhat different or similar way for most creative people. A lot of it is it's stuck inside and you just have to help it get out.
Yeah. This industry is intense, could be tense, and could be very stressful. There's lots of anxiety, worries, fear sometimes. Maintaining mental health is important while you're doing those things and going to productions and things. How do you deal with this? How do you manage to keep your mental health in the right shape?
I am so glad you asked this question. So thank you, first of all. I feel like we need to ask this question more often. I have always been very aware that this was a part that needed to be managed. When I was in my 20s, and by the way, back then, which feels like it was the dark ages, but back then, we didn't talk about mental health. It wasn't something that was palpable to talk about. It was frowned upon. But I had a therapist from when I was 20 to 29 in years old in New York City who was fantastic. She taught me a lot about how to manage my stress, how to manage my life. And most important, she made me feel very validated in who I was and what was going on in my emotions and my mental health and my stress levels and things like that. She gave me a lot of great tips for how to manage my stress, and I carry those lessons with me today. So I guess I was the type of person, probably still am, that always needed to feel a support system around me. So she would always say to me, because I was freelance producing, directing, writing, so meaning I was on different shows, on different locations, things like that. So she always said, wherever you go, wherever you are, make sure you have a couple of key people around that you know you can just lean on, talk to, share with, people that you feel comfortable talking to. So wherever that might be or wherever life took me, I would always try to manage having something that felt kind of like a community, however that would pan out. Then she also taught me things like make sure you always know some phone number in your mind. Back then we needed phone numbers. Right now it's probably a little different, but she'd always say, make sure you have a couple of key places or things that you know you can reach out to if you feel you're in distress, or if you feel as though you're maybe, you know, out of balance or out of sync somehow. And nowadays, I believe the term is dysregulated, and that was not a term used when I was, you know, in that era of life that I'm talking about. But now people use that term a lot, which is a dysregulated or regulated place. And so that was really, really important to have some knowledge of what I needed as a human being to feel balanced and to feel validated. And as I got older, it definitely helped to always take those lessons with me. And I still need them. Everyone still does. I still think to myself sometimes if I'm not feeling quite right, what is it? You know, and it could be something as simple as I forgot to eat. I need water. I don't know. It could be something very simple. And just because I'm a mature woman now, I think, doesn't mean I don't still need mental health, right? I still need to lean on people. I still need to be able to schedule the time for me. And you know, as you know, I'm an instructor, which means a lot of students always come to me. I'm the person they might lean on or talk to or what have you. But then there's that notion, I still need someone. I still need others to lean on back. And so I always make sure that I'm not standing there alone with everyone leaning on me, that I need to also have a circle around me that I can lean on as well.
What I really wanted to ask you also is this. Feature films versus TV shows. Which one do you think is better as a job these days? Like as a writer, producer, let's say. And how do you see the future of both? That's a question that bothers me a lot these days, and I always ask it my friends and my family, like, what do you watch? And everyone always says like TV shows. Nobody seems to go to theaters anymore to watch like feature films or like except it's like a Marvel or Top Gun, the next Top Gun. What is your opinion on that? Yeah.
I'm going to ask you, why do you think people say TV shows?
Well, because they come home and just want to relax, and that's what they play. And they don't have that much time to watch the whole feature film. That's kind of like the general answer that I tend to get. Yeah, some people don't even watch TV shows, but if it comes to watching, yeah, let's just make dinner and 45 or whatever, an hour. Right now, there's like an hour episodes, you know. Sometimes the TV shows turning into features turning into TV shows. Like, what's happening? But yeah, definitely is this. And
which do you prefer?
As a filmmaker, I always watch films, and I watch old cinema as well. Even if it's weird or very funny, I still like to explore something and see, because it helps me to find new perspective for my films and also for life in general. But I really love to go to theaters to watch a movie. For example, Top Gun. I watched it twice because I love aviation and stuff, and it's just like in general I love the whole thing. I would also love to go and watch Marcel the Shell. There's like a new film that just blowed up on YouTube. Someone started making like short films about this Marcel the Shell, and now it's in theaters, but it's not like widely distributed. But still, I'd love to go and watch. The only thing is that the price that always comes in the way. People pay $15 for like Netflix or something, and they can watch it as much as they want to. But in theater, you need to pay at least $15 to watch a movie. If you count like popcorn and everything, it goes like could be $50 or $100, depending on the amount of people. So I guess that's the main problem that I see, and I almost think that the next step, like for me, the next step, what could be in the future, those Hulu, HBO, Netflix and stuff, what they can do, because they're producing a lot of feature films that are originals. What they can do is to create some kind of subscription that allows you not just watch at home, but also have an option to watch the same thing in a theater. And I think that would be an interesting way to approach it, because everything is always evolving. And sometimes one technology overpowers everything for some time, but then new technology appears, new ideas appear, and everything kind of equalizes again. So that's a really difficult question, but I really want to hear what you think about it.
Yeah, you're definitely someone then that loves, it sounds like, the experience of the movies. It's a little bit like some people love going on a roller coaster, and right? And so they go out of their way to go to those long lines at Disneyland or at Universal just to ride the roller coaster. You sound a little bit like that, the person who is willing to or wants that experience in the movie theater, which is fantastic. Movies are wonderful rides, if not anything, if not a whole bunch of other things. They are cathartic. They are wonderfully out of body almost. I mean, they allow us an experience that nothing else really, just like you can't just say, oh, well, put on your headphones and watch a YouTube video on a roller coaster and it'll be the same. It is not the same, right? We know that. So movies are also not the same when you watch it at home versus when you watch it in a theater. There's a difference between that experience and the television series experience. A television series is much more about the characters that you get to know, that you keep going back to see over and over again. You're watching new things happen to the same characters. You even start to say to yourself, oh, I know what they're going to do next, because you've gotten to know these characters so much. So you're watching these characters for 8, 9, 10, 11 hours. Then the next season, another 8, 9, 10 hours. You start to feel like you're experiencing their life or their experience, and you learn from them, you grow from them, you talk about them as though you are talking about someone you know. So when you talk to, let's say you're using an example when you're talking, what happened to Don Draper in Mad Men season 2 when he was, you start to use the actual character as a way of talking about your experience in life, okay? That's the way TV series work. They work in a way that those characters have a mark on us as the audience. They leave a mark on us that is a part of our language. We start to think like them. We learn from them. In fact, one of the early ways I remember, and this is going to sound a little strange maybe to some people, but when I was becoming a manager more and more, meaning I was having people work for me, I needed to learn how to be a boss. So one of the things my brain kept going to was Star Trek Next Generation. When Patrick Stewart, it was Captain Picard, the way he was a boss, the way he was the captain, I remember thinking, okay, I get it. I have to, there's a protocol to being a boss. And I learned through watching Captain Picard how to be a boss. And that's just my simple little example. Everyone's probably got a story like that, where they learn something through a character, whether it be the right thing to learn or not. That's still one way we go about our lives and how we manage ourselves as human beings. So television series always have a place that's different from the movies, because we don't do that with the movies. We don't walk away from Top Gun and start saying, well, what would Maverick do? Now, maybe you would a little bit if you're a hardcore Top Gun fan, but you don't, you certainly, there's only, well, outside of the new movie, there was only one movie before with Maverick. So you couldn't really say very much about, well, what would Maverick do? Well, what would he do at age 57? Well, I don't know, there isn't a lot, because you didn't know him at that age until the new movie, right? So the point is just that going to see a movie in the movie theater is more of an experience, escapism, a moment where you can reach deep down inside yourself on almost that cathartic level and get some things out of yourself that can now be impacted through the magic of a movie. A television series, though, is just a different experience. So I think you asked me, though, where is the future of this? And I actually think that we have many futures. I think that there's always going to be a place for feature films. I just saw I think it was Amazon, that had the 13 Lives that I actually thought was going to be in the theaters. That's the Ron Howard movie about the soccer kids that were stuck in the cave.
Yeah, I just watched it.
Oh, did you? Was it good?
Yeah. It's so incredible that I no, I can't watch it, but then I still watch. I can't watch it, but I still watch. It's that kind of experience. It's just too tense. You don't want to watch because you don't want something to happen. You saw with these characters in this film. Yeah, it's insane. Then you think it's a real thing that happened.
Well,
yeah.
It is a real thing that happened, and we know what happened in that story. But we still want to go through the experience of it. I actually thought that was going to come out in the theater. So I actually wanted to go see it in the theater. When I saw it was on Amazon, I was actually less interested in seeing it. And the reason why is because knowing myself, I would be interrupted. So, if I were watching it at home. So I thought if I do watch it at home, I need to really carefully schedule when I was going to watch it, because otherwise I'd be interrupted. So my point in this is just that I think there's a future where we're going to have features and series. It's probably more about, are people going to want to go to the theaters? You mentioned some very valid points about how expensive it is to go to the theater, how paying for a movie ticket, you see it once. If you have a subscription to Amazon Prime or what have you, you can watch it over and over again. There will definitely be a path that will likely go more towards where the money is made, but I think there will always be room for both features and for series. It's just about where we're going to watch them and how.
But if we look at it from another perspective, back in the days, I mean, I don't know because I wasn't there, but I assume that people were more sort of open to talk to each other, open to talk to people who they don't know, starting conversations with people. But these days, I feel like there's more and more people there on their smartphones or small devices, and that kind of got them to be more, shy in a sense, or insecure. And just in general, they're not eager to go and talk to everyone, to make new friends, or to experience something like as a communal experience, like watching a movie in a theater. Do you think that has a role why there are more people watching TV shows these days?
Yeah, that is a bit of a concern, I think, for me, especially as a mother, because I feel like my own sons are not being social and they're on their computers too much. And, but I think that there's room for a new generation of how we socialize. And what I'm seeing happen in my classes, which I usually is like kind of my example of what people are doing. What I see them doing, which I think is fantastic, is if I give a homework assignment, for example, some of them are choosing to watch it at the same time and text each other while they're watching. This becomes their social life, where they're like, In the past, I think it was come over to my home, we'll watch together, we'll make some dinner. Now it's let's watch at 7 o'clock on Netflix and let's just text each other what we think as we're watching. That is becoming the new social experience, which I find incredibly intriguing to think through how that might progress. But I do think that when I was just in those early years, I remember they would be appointment television. That's what they called it. So you would go over to a friend's house every Thursday night to watch Friends or to watch, Melrose Place or whatever it was. And then you'd go home right after, you'd go in the next day to work, you'd talk about it all day long while you're going through work. Now I think it's going to be this other digital way where we're going to socialize through shows in a digital way because it's too easy to just, sit at home.
Yeah. Metaverse. We're going to live in metaverse and experience
Yes,
everything
the
virtually.
metaverse. Absolutely. That's the next, and we'll see how that goes. I mean, I'd say 10, 15 years ago, actually, no, I'm going to say 20 years ago, people kept talking about holograms. They would say holograms would be the next version that we would start to see movies and TV through. And now what do we say? We say virtual reality. We don't say holograms anymore. And now, yes, we're talking about the metaverse. We're talking about, whether it's even interactive content in gaming. All of these experiences are changing the landscape. We'll definitely see if there's a saturation point, which I actually think we are. If we aren't already there, we're very, very close. And I know the CEO of Netflix, Reed Hastings, has said we're not going to run out of content. We're going to run out of viewing hours, meaning the audiences are going to get so saturated they just don't have any more time in their day to watch something. So we very possibly are there already if we're not close to being there.
What do you think is going to happen now when the point is reached? How it will affect the society?
One thing I definitely notice is people don't seem to rewatch as much as when I was young. So when I was young, you could rewatch something so many times and enjoy it thoroughly. It was one of the things you looked forward to was to rewatch something that you watched already. And now I definitely notice no one does that anymore. So if you ask people the details of something, they just don't know. They know they enjoyed it, but they couldn't tell you what it was about. That's actually one of the things I think that gets in the way of people trying to learn how to write, people trying to learn how to become filmmakers, television creators. If they don't study something so deeply, then they're not going to grasp what goes into making it as easily, right? And certainly it may end up taking a lot longer because I think what is happening as a new normal is you go from one to the next to the next to the next rather than re-watching and examining the same thing over and over again so that you can learn what goes into making it.
Lots of surface sort of consumption and learning instead of going deeper into the subject. Or you can even notice sometimes in conversations with people you talk and then next subject. Hey, wait, we just started talking about this. That definitely the way people consume stuff these days because of the amount of stuff affects the way that we communicate with each other in the regular lives at work as well. Yeah. Let me engage your creative mind. If I'm going to ask you this extraterrestrial question. If you were an extraterrestrial from a perfect world, everything is balanced and beautiful, and then you come to our world as it is right now, what would be one thing you would fix?
I would hope that people would get the opportunity to zoom out and take a look at themselves from through a wider lens.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's something that I've been trying to do recently, actually. Yeah, You look at you walk, you see the things from this one perspective as you walk, and then you go into the building where you work, and the same things that you just saw from like this point of view, from that building, it's entirely different. It's like almost a different world, and it gives you different feelings as well. And okay, I think we're coming to the last part of our conversation, and usually I ask this question: what is your obsession of the week? Like, what is something that you've been trying to do or doing or collecting, or taking pictures? It could be anything, something that your mind was kind of like stuck in a good way about something.
Okay, I actually have one. I have this backyard that has wonderful orange trees, lemon trees, birds, squirrels, all sorts of different things going on back there. My obsession, though, is so last year we had these beautiful blue birds, the very distinctive shape to them. They had like this tail that was at a certain angle, very distinctive bird that was very, very blue, very, very beautiful. This year we have the exact same birds, same tail, same shape, everything, but they're gray. So my obsession this week has been to capture them on video because I have footage actually from last year's blue ones, and I really want to compare them because I don't understand why they're gray this year. And but I really, really believe they're the exact same bird. So I definitely have this I'm stalking the birds in my backyard.
Yeah, that's amazing. That definitely shows the level of depth that you go to in your observations. Yeah.
And obsession, because I can't seem to, I'm like always looking to see if I can get one of these birds on camera. I've already gotten a little footage, but too far away. So I'm trying to get closer and get them to not fly away. But yeah, I'm like, why are they gray this year? I just can't understand why the exact same bird in my mind. So that's why I have to see the two side by side. And yeah, so there you go. You have a slice of what's going on in my brain, whatever that's worth.
Oh, that's great. I actually was Googling the Nikon clip-on lens that you can put on your phone to like take pictures of the birds from afar from your phone. Yeah, that's also something to consider. All right, Cynthia, is there anything else, anything that you want to share with our audience? Anything that you're working on? Future projects, past projects, ongoing projects?
I did want to mention just quickly, I do have a YouTube channel which is instructional. It's called Your Hollywood Dream. I like to extend my lessons from the classroom onto YouTube whenever I can. They're not highly produced or anything like that. They're just videos that if anyone wants a quickie lesson or review about how to write a log line or how to write the antagonist or things like that, I try to put a summation of different things, different lessons on there. So that's just free and available to whoever. For the most part, though, the things I'm working on are a lot of the same thing that I always do, which is I'm always creating a lot of different things, and something usually takes the forefront at some point in time. And I have a feeling in the fall, something will take the forefront, and that's the way it always goes. So that's what I'll leave it at.
All right. Thank you, Cynthia, very much for coming today to Rumikay Talks podcast. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much.